call this work session to order. Couldn't hear me? So we've called the work session to order for July 31st. We have a very straightforward list of topics to informally go through, get an update from our manager, communications update. We're going to discuss board policies and procedures and some planning for the work that we have to do as a board and commission on appointments that will be due in September. I'll explain the documents that you have a little bit later. And you got to turn this on first. There we go. So in terms of why are we doing this, I mean, we talked about getting together for one long day or a couple of days, and by and large, that was getting more and more difficult to pull together, but we still recognize that we need to establish or build upon and develop a leadership working relationship and really update our progress and recognize where we are on our focus areas. We've had successes. We've got areas where we need to focus, identify the gaps, and really build a plan for the next 12 to 18 months, a plan that we can execute policy-wise so we can give clear direction or are giving clear direction to the manager, and then the manager then can pass that through to his team and our staff team in support of that. So we're going to conduct a series of work sessions, and again, I'm explaining some of this because apparently there was a little bit of confusion for the public. We're going to take these, focus on some key items, have a good discussion, ask questions, have that policy level discussion, and then go from there. Narrowed it down, given conflicts to 3 Tuesdays, the 31st, the 14th, and the 28th. And if there's anything left over, we'll pick up the remainder after Labor Day. I'm not going through vision and mission and all that stuff, but we do have focus areas. We've had them for over a year, year and a half, and the way we're going to attack this is today it's about operational excellence, so we'll get an update from Greg on the staffing side of it, and then our operational excellence is going through our code of ethics, our rules of procedure. I'll highlight how progress we've made there. Don't have to finalize them today, but we have to get input in such that our attorney will then put the finishing touches on it, Mr. Buckley, although he has looked at some of it. Boy, I'll tell you, what a skilled resource. Cuts to the chase just ever so quickly when you have a question. Today it's about operational excellence. On the 14th, core infrastructure and services and intelligent growth. We will have as a guest speaker there the Executive Director of Economic Development from Union County. Chris is coming, correct? Yep. And so he will join the conversation with us on growth, and then we'll wrap with the quality of life services, parks, recs, police, events, etc., and then the financial side of it to wrap it all together after we have the full picture. As I said, we have these defined areas of focus, but we haven't, as a board, actually stepped back and said, outside of operational excellence, because that's the manager's purview in terms of its staffing in the organization, but do we have any course corrections that we need to make? Do we have them defined correctly? Do we understand all of the services? We got 47, 48 services that we offer as a town. Do we really understand them? I think we had discussions during the budget year in terms of what some of those services were, how should we provide them, et cetera. Now's a great time as we have the time over the course of the year to really look at them, make sure we understand them, and to the level of service that we can provide and provide value and affordability. Why the sense of urgency? I'm not going to go through this chart, but when you look at this chart, and every one of you will get a copy of this because I got it to staff late. That's kind of the nature of a work session. But when you look at the list of things that are touched under underneath all this, we have a lot of work to do and a lot of policy direction that we can provide. If we're going to ensure that we support the vision, if we're going to ensure financial stability, evaluate the services we provide, develop an economic development strategy that gets us off the 93-7 ratio and encourage engagement. We've got a lot of work to do and some guidance to give so staff can do the work, the hard work that's really underneath it. It doesn't mean that we haven't done a lot of this or started a lot of this, but those are the things that we touch, and we need to make darn sure that we're actually touching those in the proper way. So a good example, go all the way to the right, transparency. Our rules of procedures and the things that we're looking at were really designed to are we totally transparent? How do we clean some of that stuff up as well? It's not that they were bad, it's just can we get better at it? That's kind of the direction that we're going to have to make on this. Today, it's about operational excellence. That's the definition of it. As you can see, it's pretty much aligned to the structure and then the things that we need to do as a board to make sure we run properly. And so with that, we will turn this over to get an organizational update from Greg and a communications update. And just as a note of procedure, this is a discussion. This is not decision making or anything. If you got questions, let's get them out in the open and just have an open discussion about these things.
So the first slide I just wanted to put up is to talk about the town staffing model and kind of where we are in the ongoing conversation about organizational capacity. We have shared some of that information with you before, and really that's something that we will continue to revisit as we move forward. I started with listing the town attorney as being one, just to give you an update where we stand. We've received resumes. We've had some responses to the job ads that have been out for a couple months. We really have not had applicants who have been able to satisfy the requirements of the job listing. So we are continuing to request that Mr. Buckley assist us for a while. Our suggestion is that we take some time to review what we're asking for as far as qualifications and see if we've got it right, or if there's any adjustments that can be made to that. Probably pull the ad down and then repost it at a point a couple months down the road and see if we have another group of candidates that might be willing to apply. See if we get some candidates that actually match a little bit closer to the requirements, that have the background in North Carolina in municipal law. I have talked with Mr. Buckley about if he's willing to serve for a couple more months, and he's indicated that he is. There is one item that we would need to consider if we're going to continue to utilize him, and that would be consideration of maybe an adjustment in our meeting schedule for a month or two. I've got a little chart that I made that just shows a couple conflicts that we would need to think through for just demonstrating. Basically in the month of August, the town of Matthews meets on the second and fourth Monday of the month, and then their planning board meets on the fourth Tuesday of the month. So that's the conflict with our fourth Tuesday meeting, and so he's currently missing out on attending that meeting and has another attorney in his firm that's covering for him, and it has not been an issue yet, but we can't continue to request that he takes and puts this meeting as priority over a long-standing commitment that he's had to the town of Matthews. So one consideration would be whether the board here is willing to consider in the month of August and a couple months possibly further, maybe an adjustment to the meeting schedule here, and that could be accomplished in several different ways. But for the month of August, it could be as simple as moving the fourth Tuesday meeting to, say, another night, whether it's Wednesday night or another night that week. I think it's the month of September or October. There are actually 5 Tuesdays in the month, and so that'd be fairly simple in October to move the 4th Tuesday to the 5th Tuesday. and accommodate that. And with November, with Thanksgiving week and with Christmas coming in December, there's really probably only about 2 or 3 conflicts. And at that time, the suggestion from me would be to have that job ad back out and be actively trying to find someone that would fit it, so that it's not an extended period of time, but we would buy a little bit of time between where we're at right now and putting the ad back out. So that's the approach that I would recommend if you would consider.
I can't do Wednesdays
Okay.
at all, Wednesday nights.
Does anybody else have conflicts? I can't, it's the third Wednesday, it's a conflict for me with the regional transportation.
So the Thursday might be an option for the month of August, perhaps.
You don't want to put us up on stage and we're the new Jamming on the Tracks? Just smile, come on, smile.
Not on Friday night. So if there's an agreement for us to explore that, I will work with Mr. Buckley and with Melody and with you if you have any other conflicts that you identify, and look at perhaps August. We really probably could ask him to accommodate us in the month of August one more time before it becomes an issue. So that might be an option as well, just to go ahead and try to get through August and then try to make an adjustment to the schedule.
You would check with them, so I think you heard Thursday could work. Is August a better one to adjust than September for him? He might know, because September's another one. October, there's, like you say, 5 Tuesdays, so we could move one, and then we can accommodate the schedule in November, December, given we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas in there, so we just figure out where we put the 3 meetings.
Okay.
Are you, say a little bit more about what you're seeing coming back, and why do you think we're not seeing the candidates? Or
We're seeing a lot of candidates who have but have experience in the field of law, but they don't have experience in municipal law, and specifically not in North Carolina. We had some candidates that had some experience at the state level, but that was not necessarily in municipal law. So they might have some experience with the community college or the state university system or hospital system, but it's different from municipal law. Those statutes that apply are different, and the daily practices like real estate and zoning are very different than what we were requesting. So an attorney with experience working either as a city employee or in a firm that contracted with a city or town for a number of years, we just didn't see those applicants that met the requirements of what we were listing. I think we do need to go back and look at what we're asking for. We have done some targeted, not recruitment, but some targeted advertising with people by word of mouth to try to talk to other attorneys that are in the business and on the municipal side, and let them know that if they had colleagues in cities and towns that might be looking, that this would be a place to look. We have heard that there are some municipal attorneys that are kind of kicking the idea around, but they haven't applied yet. So we'll just have to wait and see. That their circumstances might change in the community that they're in right now, but they haven't applied as of yet. So recommend just giving it a few more months and seeing if we can put the ad back out and get some additional talk about it in the municipal side of the house. There may be a county attorney someplace that's qualified to fit the bill as well. So fairly limited number of attorneys that are in that particular specialty, so particularly with North Carolina experience.
I noticed on the league website there's no openings for, they're not advertising anything for attorneys. Attorney recruitment done through another list, or okay.
It would be there if there's one active.
Okay.
we'll take that back to Mr. Buckley and see if we can work with him on making an adjustment or two over the next couple months and keep the board and the town clerk in that conversation as well.
You guys have any questions or anything?
Just one, is the compensation something that, are you getting any feedback on that? So you don't know if that's attractive or not attractive?
No, I think what we've said is the compensation is going to be fair, and in some conversations with attorneys in the field and those that have interest, I don't think that the salary, from what I've seen or heard, has come up as a topic of negativity. Now, are there folks who have an opinion about the size of our community and what we could pay and they don't voice it? That we don't know, but I haven't heard it as you know, we're not getting phone calls to say, what's the salary going to be? I don't know if I want to apply. So that's not coming up as a, we have informally talked with a number of attorneys that are in that municipal field and said, look, tell your friends not to think about this as being too small, because this is a growing community with an opportunity. And so if you're in a medium to large size city and you're the second or third attorney on the staff, this could be a great fit for you. And ultimately, I think that's where we'll, you know, possibly land if we're able to attract an attorney that's the town attorney on staff. That would be where we'll probably see applicants come. It may end up that we have to look at a long-term or a medium-term contractual relationship with an attorney that specializes in municipal law but is in the private sector, like Mr. Buckley and his firm. Not necessarily him, but somebody like him. Moving forward, the town engineer, director of development services position is open, and we're moving into the process to begin filling that, and that will move along pretty quickly. We will definitely need to replace that position without a doubt. We have a project engineer that is unfilled that we'll get to as we move forward, that's in that same department, but it's currently not filled. In that particular case, we have had a hard time attracting an engineer at the salary range that we were trying to target. So to be quite frank, we've talked with several, and the salary was an issue, and we're going to have to go back and look at that and see if we need to make adjustments. The job market right now for engineering staff is tight, so that's just the reality. So we're moving through that process. Both of those are in the development services department. Long term, just as an FYI, I think that there needs to be an examination of the development services department to see if we need to keep all those services under one department or if there's a reorganization that might be in order. One possibility is that the planning and zoning function might need to be spun off into another freestanding department, because that's a fairly large department and is continuing to grow. And so it's a lot to ask of one individual to manage multiple lines. And you, as you're aware, you've got building inspections, engineering, downtown development, code enforcement, planning and zoning, and erosion and sediment control under the engineering function. So there's a lot of different activities going on in that department. So we need to look at that moving forward, just as a to do later. I'm not suggesting that needs to be done immediately, but it's something to try to get out in front of us.
Just on that, I know I've asked the question, but maybe you could explain to everybody. The statute changed, and we need to be more accountable on the inspection side. You might want to just say a few words as to the work Lisa's doing to try to make sure we're conforming to.
Sure. So the statute did change, but it really only changed in the sense that it's asking us now to report revenues and expenditures. So there's not a lot of guidance on how they expect those to be tracked. And Lisa's going to spend some time on this in some detail, but not great detail, in the third meeting. However, we will need to monitor those expenditures real closely, and she's done a lot of work over the last number of months trying to go back and look at areas where I would say you have blended expenses, but for instance, if IT functions are supporting building inspections, we've got to divorce those two and track those expenses. You know, hard building inspections over in building inspections, and whether it's an IT cost or it's not an IT cost, not commingle it in IT. So that's been underway for a number of months, and the budget as it's adopted actually reflects those changes. So that's just something that we'll have to monitor moving forward. She's going to have some recommendations moving forward as far as some policies that would affect building inspections. I've got some thoughts that I'll share with you in a couple weeks about how we set up building inspections so that there are reserves to deal with the downturns in the economy that will eventually happen. And so there's a very systematic way about doing that, and so we're well down that path to have that happen. Right now, the state really hasn't said anything as to what they anticipate doing with the information. They've simply said, we want you to report your expenditures and your revenues at the end of the year. And there's a report that we're already submitting to the state, so it's just 2 more lines on that report. And so 2 or 3 years down the road, after they've gathered some information, they may want to go back and look at what communities are actually doing. So it's a very imprecise science, because you're basically projecting the number of building permits that you're going to get each year, and you're projecting your costs that you're going to incur each year. And that's completely based on the economy, the local market, the type of permit, the number of inspections and re-inspections. Highly variable indicators there. So I think the state does understand and realize that you're never going to have a year where you budget $100,000 and your expenses are exactly $100,000. And so your financial system needs to be set up so that you can accommodate a year where you have a surplus and you can get through a year where you have a deficit. And so that's what we'll be talking to you about in a couple of weeks, kind of a structural way to do that. And it's handled that way other places already. So we'll talk through that.
Yeah, this is one we're going to have to be real consistent all across the board message-wise, because politically, the flip side of that is politically, there is a desire to, let's just say, make no money whatsoever, and what is revenue and what is profit is being debated by the Builders Association, which is not necessarily where we want it to be at this point.
Well, and the reality is this: you can't run an organization and provide the service levels at the service levels that they want and expand it and contract it on a yearly basis. So if you have a year where it slows down, you don't want to lay off 2 people in your building inspection department that have 10 or 15 years of experience, and then things ramp back up and they complain because you can't get out there in 2 days to do inspection. So there has to be a mature conversation at the state level as to what do they really want. Do they want to have a dollar for dollar parity where, you know, there's never going to be a revenue made? Or are we adult enough to understand that we have to take a very long-term strategic view of this service and understand it as based on the economy? And you can't manage it like you're buying widgets at a store and wait till you need 2 more and then order them from Amazon or someplace. So it's going to have some thought put into it, and so we would urge a lot of conversation with municipalities before additional rules and structures put in place at the state level, because not every community's providing the same level of service. Our inspection turnaround is fairly quick, and we're not getting complaints about not getting out there. We've had a lot of discussions internally, but also with the state office of the building inspector's office about, do we need additional help and resources? And they've said, you know, remind your folks, if you need to bring in some sort of part-time help to stay on track, you have the ability to do that. And we've said, thank you, we're performing to standard right now. So that's just an ongoing conversation. As the mayor noted, there are folks that are watching it and wanting to intervene in it, but to provide the service long-term and do it well, you can't contract a department really quickly because that has very negative consequences. And we're still living through those from the last recession where counties around us laid off large numbers of people and they no longer are in the profession. So right now, there's a shortage of level 3 inspectors. So that's just, it happened in the construction industry. A lot of construction subs went out of business and they never came back. So that same thing happened in the inspection side of the house as well. Related to that is the permitting office manager, which is part of the building inspection function, which actually will reside in the front of the office and have the responsibility to make sure that we are communicating in the front, that we're staying on track with issuing permits, that we've got adequate coverage there, that we're also able to handle other customer service type permits. For instance, we have a chicken permit. We shouldn't have to go find somebody in the back to issue a permit for that. We should be able to handle it up front and kind of have a seamless front office function. So that person will be joining us here in the month of August very soon. We haven't made an announcement on that. We're still working on the announcement, but we have a commitment to have a new person there. It was actually part of the last year's budget. So that is moving forward, and the focus there is customer service completely. Being able to walk in and get responsive interaction, whether it's paying taxes, getting permits, doing building inspection appointments, just keeping that moving forward, because as you've noticed on the permits that are coming out, the reporting on a monthly basis, we've had 49 new houses, we've had 39 new houses. Things have not slowed down. They're still moving at a rapid clip, so there's a lot of activity going on and a lot of permits being needed, as well as the apartments are about to get underway and eventually start going vertical. So that will be an impact as well. Additional questions on the personnel kind of operational side. Just as a note, the finance staff is continuing the closeout process on the books for last year. So last year ended on June 30. Something different with municipal finances that you might not see in a private business is that we're not operating on a cash basis. So we're a modified accrual type accounting, which means that there are revenues that were generated in the last quarter of FY 18 that need to go in FY 18. And so those revenues, even though they were generated in FY 18, might have to flow through the state and the county and the sales tax path, and it may be 2 months before you see that check. That actually has to be reflected in the books for last year. And so Lisa and her staff are working through that and finishing up that process for the previous year, and she'll share some of that with you in a couple of weeks. But I just wanted to note that because you don't see financials put out second week in July to say this is how we ended the year, and there's a very good reason. It's because some of our revenues won't come in until August. So
I think the question that I would have is, well, I get that. Our previous auditor usually took until the end of the calendar year and maybe January, which seems lengthy. So hopefully in a couple weeks, Lisa can kind of give us a gauge as to when, how that process is going, so we can feel comfortable that we're going to get it a little bit faster than.
Well, there's a couple things I'd note there. One is the closeout process internally is going to be different than the auditor coming in and verifying what they see and them agreeing that you're materially correct in how you accounted for it. Statutorily, you need to have that into the LGC by the end of October, I believe it is, so they can review it. If you don't hit it, there's no penalty necessarily. They just encourage you to get it in on time. I think in some years in the past, we haven't hit that goal and may not hit it this year, quite frankly. There's a lot of work being done this year to standardize the way we report moving forward, and Lisa and her staff are extremely busy right now trying to get that done and get it the way it really needs to be. So there's a couple closes of the books, but that's not officially done yet, so there's no draft statement or anything like that we can put out yet, so that's going to be a little bit further down the road. When the auditors are here, then they'll do their work and come back in, maybe November, December timeframe. And that's typical everywhere. That's very rare. I don't say rarely, but that's pretty much the time frame for auditors to come in and do their report to boards is November, December, or January. So the other part of that is looking forward, and I won't steal any thunder, but some of those policies that we talked about from a financial standpoint need to be amended, or put in place, and so that'll be some of the things that we'll be talking about moving forward as well, but that can't really happen until they get closer to closing out the books. The other three things that I want to report to you on really ties back to the initial retreat, and it ties to the budget, and that are the three main goals that came out of the retreat in January: improve traffic congestion, complete sidewalks, and then the master plan for parks and recreation. Improve traffic congestion, there were two parts of the budget that really addressed that directly, and that was the STP and then long range, the CIP. STP being those small transportation projects that are funded through the use of vehicle fee. The CIP are the larger capital projects that are multi-year in nature, may need debt, may need a partnership with other folks, and some of that we'll be talking about at the next meeting, some of those projects. So that's in improving traffic congestion. A couple of projects that we've talked about at the last meeting. One thing I wanted to note is there may be a little bit of confusion about how you apply the funds for STP program, which are local dollars generated on the vehicle fee, and the Powell bill monies, which are state gas tax dollars that come to the town that can be used for state and local roads. Essentially what you're doing is you're using the STP, or the vehicle fee dollars. Those are used on your local projects, and then you can use your Powell bill dollars on your state road projects. So when we talk about STP versus CIP versus Powell bill, I know it can be confusing, but what I can tell you is that we're going to manage on the accounting side to make sure that if it's Powell bill that needs to be used on a state road, we're using Powell bill. If it's vehicle fee that needs to be used on a local road, we're using those. And you can essentially use your STP, or vehicle fee, to do your paving on local roads. So it's basically making sure that you're using the appropriate pot of money and you're accounting for it, and that's part of what Lisa will be tasked with doing, and that can be confusing.
Why did we then have two projects submitted to us at the last meeting for the STP that are state road projects?
Because you can fund them with Powell bill.
Okay, but the Powell bill you're saying is a separate bucket of money from STP. We need to have separate language too. We need to have like municipal STP and something else, so that we keep our language consistent as well.
And you're going to have some where they're, just to go back, they're going to be a blend. If you look at the Waxhaw, Marvin, Kensington Road intersection, you got both there. You got a town road crossing a state road. But we'll account for that. We'll make sure it's in the right fund. That can be confusing, though, if you're out here in the public and don't understand what's happening there. But the other thing that's happening, too, we have some dollars that we're contributing on that particular intersection that are used from the developer-funded project. So that $100,000 is really developer funds that came out of the Millbridge project. So it can be confusing, but we have the accounting function in place now to keep track of it and show it in the right lines.
I just think we have a great opportunity to tell a good story, and got to figure out how to tell it, because by the end of September we'll have had hopefully the monies from whichever funded DA, whichever DA bucket it is at the state level that will help us with Kensington. We got developer funding, we have spot safety funding, and most 99% of the people in the town probably don't understand all of that. Maybe 100% of the board, including me, don't understand all those moving piece parts at this point in time. But it's not like we're not doing anything, and how we strike that balance so people understand. You know, I thought putting something out there on Facebook I thought it was nice that some people came back and said, hey, thank you for doing this, so at least we can ask a question. Because congestion, to your point, is one of those that everybody wants to talk about because it's one of those irritants out there. I think the other thing people don't understand, I think I just signed the Powell bill, and it's 60 miles of road, of which 40 of it is town. So we got a lot of town-owned roads, and we don't even realize it. You know, everybody thinks because 16 and 75, but 2/3 of the roads are town-owned, not state-owned, and you know that's a big ticket item. So just got an opportunity. That's
And quite frankly, these projects will only get more complex and complicated over time. Big projects end up using multiple funding sources, and if you think through how that might work, is once you have a stormwater program and function in place, you may be building curb and gutter and drainage inlets with stormwater adjacent to or as part of a road project. So in a downtown, think through what that might look like. You could be spending tap money and stormwater and road, depending on whether it's a state or local road. So it just it'll get pretty complicated, but we'll have the ability to keep track of it and split it out and answer questions and do what we need to do.
Pine Oak is all state money. Just
correct. So that was the improved traffic congestion. Complete sidewalks is really goes right back to the STP. One of those projects that we talked about already with sidewalks. We have the ability to look at other sidewalks, and we would encourage a future discussion about what the STP should include, because it can be 10 or 12 projects. We're continuing the CDBG project that's on Waxhaw Marvin Road, so that is, again, looking at sidewalks. We had a little sidewalk money in the budget, but usually just kind of gap closing projects. And so we're working on item number 2, which is completion of sidewalks around town. Item 3, master plan for Parks and Recreation, and the update of that is on track. We have got another public session coming up. Those will have opportunities for input. The surveys are out, so folks can fill those out. They are numbered, so there's a mechanism so we make sure everybody's got an opportunity, but we don't get 5 from one individual. So that's on track. We're on time, and that's progressing. So those are the big 3 things that came out of the retreat, and we continue to work that were rolled into the budget, kind of where we stand. We will touch on different parts of these in the next couple sessions. So when we start talking about infrastructure, we're going to talk specifically about where we do stand with Kensington, downtown, and some updates there, and some of our other projects. And so that'll get to the infrastructure. But again, we do want to ask that the board considers kind of a robust discussion of STP and what may or may not be on that big list. While we acknowledge we need to get one going and get moving on it, we need to kind of have a good working list.
You know, maybe I'm just throwing this out for everybody. It's probably been 1.5 years since the engineering side came to the board and, hey, here is our assessment of all the roads in terms of that. Not that we have to have a list, but here's the ones that are the highest priority, highest need, medium need. We probably won't need to touch them, and the ones that, hey, we're waiting to have turned over kind of thing. Maybe, you know, that kind of overview, so we all have a picture of where we're headed and you know, what kind of need we have. Because it's been a while, and yet I see progress if you go around town. There's no question about that. But it's been a while. Just maybe if, I know Matt's got 6 million other things going on, but if in some way, as part of the infrastructure update, we can just get a thought process on that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think the other thing we can do is report out on what's been paved this summer already, because there's been some work done, and so maybe a little report on that, and then maybe a future-looking what's to be done in this calendar year, or fiscal year rather. I do not believe that we have announced our next 5 or 6 projects, so we're typically in the month of July trying to finalize what those are. So that might be a timely thing to come back with. You know, what's this year's paving schedule look like? Where would it likely happen? So we can certainly do that.
I kind of would like to know more of a master plan on the sidewalks. When I think of my street, I'm on Pine Oak and Providence, basically. Both are state roads. So I have no sidewalks because we're waiting for them to put those in. I don't know that will ever be put in on Pine Oak. So, but yet we need to have, our sidewalks need to be continuous throughout the whole town. I mean, I'm actually somebody who would walk to town from Pine Oak Road. I know not everybody would do that, but do we have any kind of plan or map of showing how we're planning on joining all of these sidewalks together?
Yeah, we have a ranked system for sidewalks just like we have for roads and road maintenance, so we can share that as well.
And that was based off of the master sidewalk plan that probably a good time to just get an update on that, because you know, new faces on the board. Let's get everybody on the same page on that.
Sure. Those are the big items that I had. I'll take any questions that you might have.
One question I do have on the salary for the town engineer. So if you decide that salary needs to be increased, do you then move money from somewhere else in the budget for that, or is that something that has to wait till the next budget cycle? Or
so two parts of that answer. Yes would be the first answer. Is if the engineering salary, for instance, was not adequate to hire somebody, then we would have to internally move money to that salary line. That being said, we have a pay plan that has ranges, and so a range would have to accommodate that salary. So if it came to a point where we couldn't find somebody that would serve in a position within the range, then I would need to come back to the board and say we really need to adjust this range. So we have current minimums and maximums, and so if they're out of whack and we can't recruit or find someone that would serve, then we would come back to the board and ask to have that adjusted. That being said, that is a plan that needs to be reviewed every 5 years or less. In a growing economy, it may be sooner than 5 years, but in a slow economy, 5 years certainly may be more than adequate. But that's something that we do each year is we are looking at those positions, and so we would come to you if we needed to make adjustments.
Is that the only issue with the engineering, the salary, or is it people that are applying are just not qualified? Is it a mixture?
No, I think we're having people who are qualified, but they're making, and not the town engineer, but this project engineer position, they're making more money than what we were advertising. And they're in good employment situation, so they're looking to better themselves. And so our benefits are good, but the benefits plus the salary is really what they're looking for. So the salary is fairly tight in the engineering side right now. But we'll come back to you if we need to come back with a salary range adjustment if that's needed. So moving forward into kind of the communication side, this is just kind of an interim year update, and some of this you've seen before in January, but we'll talk about kind of how we've implemented parts of it. This annual plan is worked through with the consulting team, the communications team, and the manager. We're looking at some specific things that we want to deliver during the year, and then some time that we want to implement those. And I'm going to go through a few of those in a moment where we've already implemented specific things. But this allows you as a board and us as staff to kind of get together and think about objectives and strategies and how we can use our resources to achieve them. And so what are we trying to do? We're trying to make people aware of what you as a board are doing, aware of what staff is doing and delivering, and then try to gather in opinions on different issues, but sometimes you have to educate in order to have a good opinion come back from the public. So that's kind of the overall plan. One of the first objectives was to increase awareness of where we're at and our policies. So we need to try to provide updates in easy to understand, smaller, bite-sized, timely type communications. One of the things that's been effective this year is Mayor has a BOC recap that's done generally the day after, morning after. It's posted to social media. It's in the Tri-W. People seem to have reacted favorably to that because it really just nets it out. You don't have to sit and watch the whole meeting. You don't have to wait a couple weeks for the full minutes to come out. You can kind of get a sense of what happened. You may not really care who said what. You just want to see what the vote was and what got passed or adopted. And that's, from what we've heard, been fairly well received. And so that has been something new that's occurred in the last few months. A second item is just more interaction with the residents and our business owners and trying to use the website to interact with people. And so this is an ongoing struggle, is what I'm going to call it, because there's a pull and push between putting a lot of information on the website and making all that information searchable and making it user-friendly and making it timely and up-to-date. One thing that we're working on is scheduling some training for all of our website content contributors to get them the latest on how they can keep things up to date. Who are our website content contributors? That's not the communications folks, that's our departments. So that's specific people in departments that are tasked with helping to keep things up to date, keep the dates up to date, keep in the planning department. We got a lot of plans that come in. Keep those plans posted on Fridays at noon, making sure that we're getting things kept timely there. So that training is scheduled in the near future for all those folks who are part of that content contribution function. Third item is just work to get accurate coverage in the local media and maintaining positive relationship with the local media. One thing I would say here before we talk about specific examples, is sometimes the most positive thing that happens with the local media is that there's not a story written or there's not an inaccurate story written. We saw that over the last week or so where somebody got the wrong idea about how the vehicle fee interacted with Kensington Drive and just general confusion with how big projects are funded versus how smaller projects are funded. And so that was no fault of the person who made that assumption. They just didn't understand local government funding and particularly CIP projects. So I think we've seen some change in tone in some of the relationships with some of our local media. I think it has improved. This is something that we need to continue to work on. One thing is that we do try to quickly respond to media requests, and sometimes those come in directly to town staff. Sometimes they come in to the communications folks. Sometimes they come to you, and you feed those over to us. So part of what we want to do is try to respond as quickly but accurately in those cases. The web page and online newsroom for media, that's something that's in progress to try to get more information. The media now here and other places are going to Twitter. I mean, they're getting their instant news off of what happens on Twitter, and then that's how they're writing stories. They're either following up or they're doing something off of how they're seeing chats out there going on. We did continue or implemented after the January retreat a change in the newspaper, and so we went away from having a town newspaper to having a more timely weekly insert in the Tri-W. Again, I'd say that has been fairly well received. It gives us opportunity to be actually more timely in trying to push stories that are relevant and make sure that information gets out there. We continue to work on providing content, but really that hadn't been a problem. We've had good content, and we've had pretty good feedback from people just saying, I like getting it on a weekly basis and seeing what's happening there. And lastly, it was more cost effective, and long term has better coverage than just having it in town. The last bullet is just trying to provide local media with leads and story ideas that give them something to write about. And it's not just local media. Quite frankly, we're working with some state media to try to position the town for the next year to get some state magazine type coverage. There's a lot of things that are going on here that would make absolutely wonderful stories as far as downtown redevelopment, local businesses. And so that's a long-term goal. Is the lead time on the statewide media is much longer. Local media certainly is shorter, and we have had some nice stories written. A couple dealt directly with downtown. I thought Kurt did a nice job with some quotes where they got it right, and they kind of reported very accurately. So I think that there have been several stories in the last 2 months, and in particular, I thought that were right on the money, and there was not an inaccurate part to it. So that has been beneficial. So where all can you get information about the town? There's a lot of different places, and it just depends on where residents want to try to plug into. Certainly the Tri-W is distributed around town and in other communities, and that's a free publication. We're right in the middle usually, and have a page or two there. Waxhaw Happenings continues to be put out on a monthly basis. That's another one where you subscribe to opt into it. That one is the one that won one of the awards here not long ago, so it is well done, and so we have folks that watch for that every month toward the beginning of the month. You still can go on the town website and sign up for a variety of notices for a variety of topics, and if you haven't done that, go take a look at that notification button, and you can opt in and opt out to any of those anytime you want to. You can unsubscribe yourself, but you will get a text. If you choose a text message, it'll ask you to say yes to subscribe yourself to it. So you do it, go in, pick what you want to follow, and you can do that. I think the mayor did that recently on something. So.
No, I have a question for you. So is there any way IT or whomever can look into, so you sign up, I'm on every one of them, and then we announce the Board of Commissioners meeting. You're going to get 15 emails, one from each one of them. I don't know if there's a mechanism that, hey, just the message goes out once and you don't have to get notified by every one of those. I don't mind hitting the delete, but I mean, it all of a sudden it all comes at once.
Yeah, we can look at that. There might be a way to not duplicate those if it's the same exact message.
It's the exact same message, announcing the meeting, boom, just goes, did you, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and if you need some assistance in unsubscribing or subscribing or whatever, just let our folks know, and we'll help with that. But we'll look at that particular item because you don't need 15 notices. The other one that's on the website and you can opt into is Code Red, and if you haven't done that, I would urge you to. That is going to give you local information as far as emergency management, and so that's a great one to have. It's not hard to do, and you can opt in, opt out however you want to on that. And then three other things that are social media related. The town's got Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and have different posts that go out, and
Who tweets for us?
generally not me.
Okay. Okay.
Those also are kind of interesting because they, as you probably know, have different audiences, and they have different times of the day when people tune into them and pay attention. So if you wonder why something comes out on Friday night, or why it comes out on Monday morning, or it comes out, there is method to that. And so town staff meets with the communications staff on a monthly basis, actually on a weekly basis, but on a monthly basis talks about what's effective and you know, what's working, number of followers, are we losing, attracting, what kind of articles are the most interesting to people. And the one that I would say always leads the pack is anytime there's a new restaurant opens, that one gets thousands of views, and people love new restaurants, and they retweet it and repost it and do whatever to it. So that's being actively managed on a monthly basis, but really a conversation about those type things happens weekly. So those are some of the information resources. One thing that's coming up this fall and that we're working on planning, there's going to be a couple exercises that will involve staff this year. We're working through communicating some things internally to our staff to have a tabletop exercise that'll be planned in conjunction with Union County Emergency Management. That will take place first, and then there will be a full exercise that's going to take place that will involve our staff. It will not be tabletop, it'll be more of a exercise. That's something that we need to do internally and see how we score on it and see where we have opportunities for improvement. These type things can happen. A few years back there was a train derailment, so there's an opportunity for any day something bad to happen where you have to turn that emergency communication and emergency management plan into real action. The communication team and the deputy clerk met with PIOs in the county recently, really because you don't want to meet somebody else in the midst of an emergency. The same thing occurred with myself, Kelly, and some other folks who Commissioner Westlick went over to Union County and met and participated in a emergency management training seminar for part of a day, and so met some of those same people because, again, you don't want to meet them in the middle of a crisis. And so just getting that open line of communication. The emergency manager for the county's been over here recently, and we're planning on a monthly basis these exercises that are coming up. So that'll be a good opportunity to learn. It really is not something that we're going into to be critical. It's really something we're learning, going into to use as a learning experience, and we'll absolutely learn what we need to do better from that. New things that have happened in 17 and 18. A lot of our branding stuff has really started rolling out, and so the W's been in place now for well over a year. Our colors have been in place now well over a year. So as signs are being updated, we're reflecting those. And so downtown, the sign that you see on the right, that's the map, that actually has a magnetic backing, so that can be replaced as businesses change and things happen. So that was not a sign that's forever and a day. It's set up to be changeable. I'm not going to read all those. You can read them, but Waxhaw magazine's done once a year, but that really has our look and our brand and our logo and colors, and was done very well with the WBA. There's a town calendar. There's the Waxhaw PD just is in the midst of the logo, and the seal is designed, and they're just now starting the process of slowly rolling those out. They're not certainly throwing out every uniform and ordering new uniforms, but they'll keep the old logo, the old uniforms, and slowly, as it makes sense financially, integrate the new logo, the new seal. So, in fact, that conversation we had today, which is the detectives will probably be in the old seal for a number of years because we don't go out and buy them a bunch of new uniforms if they're detectives. So they'll probably have older uniforms for a while. Economic impact brochure, Kurt worked on that. It has a lot of information about our downtown businesses. There's several maps that show parking and event signage and things like that. And then there's some new event logos that are new for 17, and then there'll be more rolled out this fall as we get new signage downtown and new little street banners. So those are coming the next year. So this is kind of the flow. If we hear of the issue, then we try to pull in the comms team and make sure that we're, again, working through it as one team and try to come up with a uniform approach to how we're going to respond. Sometimes the response is we need to provide information to the reporter, but we may need to provide information to you too, and we've done some of that where we say, look, this is where they're going with the story, or sometimes we don't know where they're going with the story, so we just provide them basic information and they don't follow up, and then they write the article. So it's undetermined. We try to work with them to say, what's your angle on the story? Sometimes they don't share that. Sometimes we know exactly what they're doing. We have TV crews that come to town, and sometimes they just start taking video and you don't know kind of where they're headed with it. But as long as we're alerted, we're going to try to contact them that same day and find out what they need, what information they want, what the placement is. Are they going to be running a 6 o'clock story, or is this something for 11 o'clock, or is this the next day, or what's the urgency for them as the news organization? So that's just part of that flow. And the last big outreach as far as communications that we did and we started and we plan to continue is Waxhaw 101. And it was our first educational outreach at a town-wide level. The police have been doing a similar type program that focused on the police, but this was really to get an understanding of the entire workings of town government from a broad perspective. We started it in February. We had 8 classes. I think I can say, by all accounts, the participants enjoyed the program. They were engaged. The staff was engaged. The staff enjoyed the program, and so I think we got a big win with that first program, and we want to build on that next year. We got a lot of feedback. We did surveys, got comments. Those will get incorporated next year. Certainly our staff will be more comfortable in year 2, and will feel more like they're sure of themselves in providing the program. Personally, I'd like to see the program grow a little bigger. We could accommodate a few more people in the night session. A long-term goal is to see if there's a need and interest in having a daytime session. That may or may not be something that we're close to in the next couple of years, but over time there may be a desire to have a daytime session for folks who cannot come out at night. Maybe they have commitments with their family, their children, and they can't do night sessions, and so maybe they could work a 10 to 12 in the morning type schedule. So we'll monitor that and see. The first barometer is to get to a point where we fill up the class. And so if we get a full class and have a waiting schedule on a consistent basis, then we can start looking at what other times might work. And that is the comms update.
I think it's interesting how you tied all that together. Did you hear those beeps? So a news flash went out announcing the town attorney position. Great way to do it. Any questions for Greg?
I have one. Since the new board was sworn in, have there been any new employee staff policies or procedures that you've implemented that we should know about?
So well, that's a broad question. The personnel policy has not been updated because that would come to the board. Policies or procedures, we're always going to have internal policies and procedures, but I'd want to go back and see what that might be.
Okay.
Is there a specific question?
No, I was just curious. I mean, I assume since you've been here a year now that you're making changes and adjustments as you go and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and just so that we know what's happening, I would like to know, maybe you can bring us an update at the next meeting. If there's anything that you've changed since you've gotten
Yeah.
here or since we've gotten here,
Sure.
that is a new way of how things are working with staff.
So I'll give you one example just off the top of my head that we just did, and it really goes to being better managers of our time. Our comp time program had been in place for a number of years, and I think comp time meaning if you work and you need to take time and a half off to make up for it because you work more than 40 hours. There's some very good guidance that's given by how the federal government wants you to do that, and so we've looked at that and made some internal policy direction to our department heads as far as how we're going to comply with that and make sure that we're complying with it. Some of the departments, like the police department, they don't need to do comp time because it's a difficult tool to utilize when you're on a schedule that's as scheduled as they are. Certainly with the events and the park and rec staff, you can understand with events, you would need to have the ability to have comp time and to take it in a period of time. So we have, to that point directly, put policies and procedures in place internally that manages that much better than we have managed it in the past. I kind of go back and look broadly at your question because absolutely there's been some things. They're not necessarily all personnel policy type things. Sometimes it's internal procedures that just are daily management type stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, now on to our work. First item,
Can we take a 5-minute break?
we can take a 5-minute break, yes.
Stretch our-
Come back So, first up, rules of procedures. That's the thicker one that I laid on your desk. And basically, what we have going here is, so just from a process standpoint, we had one of our summer interns, Jenna, review the rules of procedure, the code of ethics, and in the process of looking at the board protocol. She reviewed the existing policies, researched the latest school of government publications, researched other towns and cities, and consulted with staff, and purposely will wait to consult with Charlie until get all the input. She is studying policy at school, so great opportunity to have an objective set of eyes, take a look at it. I've never seen somebody looking at policy documents and have a continual smile on their face. I mean, God love her. I thought it was great. What she's done is, what we have here on the rules of procedure is, and for the code of ethics, the changes are highlighted in yellow. What we're trying to get to is roughly a week from now, have your final input. So we'll get it to Charlie for his legal review, and then presentation back to the board for approval. And the documents reviewed are the ones there. So in terms of the rules of procedure, basically what I have listed up here are things that we called out, talked with people to say, hey, what are some of the things that need to change or recommend that they change? So electronic participation in board meetings. It was very loose. Don't want to abuse it, but we want to provide for it. If you have a personal situation arises, you clear it through the procedure here, but it's not because you don't want to come or you want to sit in your PJs back at home kind of thing. It's for personal situations arising. I can give you a couple of examples. One former commissioner got called out of town, but needed to participate in an evening meeting and did it from his hotel room. Perfect use of the electronic policy. But then we had others that just kind of wanted to use it, and we'll just leave it at that. And so just this kind of cleans it up. Number 5, broadcasting and recording meetings. This was not in our previous rules of procedure by statute, and Charlie pointed this out, and Jenna had caught it. Any person may photograph, film, tape record, etc., but it's up to us through the town manager to decide where we want that to occur. People are not to stand up and jump up and take pictures at any point in time other than the staff designated. So if you see what we have here is we've opened the pathway up here. I think at a future meeting, maybe we designate this area. It'd be my suggestion as if cameras are coming, this is where they are. If people are going to stand up, they're going to stand up over here, but not walking around and taking pictures, et cetera. And that's new, but it's up to the town manager to do that. You see, I didn't catch Rule 6. Schedule changes, how they have to be handled by the staff. Just a little bit of cleanup there as to we didn't have it captured as to where we would publish and how we would publish any changes, and so we captured that. Rule 11, we really, at the suggestion of several people, cleaned up the agenda. Everybody recalls, these were written in 2015, and so we had the process was based upon the paper approach and how we did things, and so we kind of cleaned it up and tied it to the electronic approach that we're on, and cleaned some things up based upon some challenges or issues that have come up. So there's no real change in how we draft the agenda. Greg's got a very formal process, and as the mayor, he reviews it with me to make sure that we haven't missed anything. Do we have all the preparation? Are we going to? I don't take things off. It is more a matter of Have we done the right diligence to make sure everybody's prepared? Is there anything missing or anything like that? What we've done, though, is we've shortened the schedule on this. So we go, Greg gets their stuff 5 days, and all of the material is in 4 days. We're going towards publishing the agenda, as you read all the way down through it, by late Thursday afternoon, so everybody has a chance to look at it Friday and get something in. One of the complaints that we're addressing there is the perception that because the agenda goes out on a Friday, and there's a change, something's happening over the weekend, what's going on. That takes away all that. None of that happened, but that takes away any notion that that does occur. It also gives the board a chance to look at it and get their comments into Greg for staff addressing as needed, et cetera. That doesn't mean that we modify the agenda. The agenda modifications still have to occur at the meeting. In terms of board member initiated requests, this question has come up. Basically, what we can't do is just throw an item on the agenda and surprise people. And then we get in the mode of taking things off, et cetera. So what we pattern this after is, hey, if you want to get something on the agenda, bring it forward. Let's talk about it. Greg and I will be happy to talk with you. What does that mean? How do we get the right staff person assigned if that's needed to get the right documentation, et cetera? Sometimes it's the attorney, et cetera. But go through the process so it gets put on the agenda properly. Emphasis on get it on the agenda, but it may take a week or so to get it on the agenda because of the preparation. Again, though, that's just make the request, and it will avoid surprises, which is what we're trying to do. That does not take away anybody's opportunity to give a report at the end or anything like that. This is an agenda item that you're asking the board to take action on, and which happens. There's no question about that. Just give the board time, and obviously the board has time to remove it too if you don't have time. You see the Thursday as you go through. Oops, on the wrong one. As you go through the rule, you see the time frames, the agenda packet. We'll consider changes at the appropriate time at the meeting as we adopt the agenda. So that takes care of, I want to add one more, 11C. Had this come up a couple of times. Very legitimate. Board members have had concern about a particular item on the consent agenda. I highlighted C, it's not a change, but when you vote nay on a consent agenda, you're voting nay for everything on the consent agenda. So if you really are objecting to one thing, make sure we pull it off and just have a formal vote. So whoever asks, has a concern, it gets addressed appropriately as that agenda item instead of the whole consent agenda, because sometimes there's things on there and you're voting against certain things that you may not want to vote against. That's 11C. All right. Rule 13. Order of business. I just highlighted in yellow the clarity. Public comments pertaining to the agenda happen up front. At the end of the meeting, the sequence will be general public comments. We'll wrap with our reports so as to not inconvenience anyone, and then the closed session. But that's just kind of a sequencing thing. We'll wrap with our reports in case we want a discussion. That way citizens can listen, and if they don't want to listen to our reports, they can, we're not holding them back at all. Let's see, number 17. Let me just see. I'm not sure why I called that one out, because it's not highlighted. So we'll just move on from there. 24, 23, 24, the changing of vote, duty to vote. we've had a little bit of discussion around that. Just highlight the fact we all have a duty to vote. If once I announce the result, you don't have the ability to change your vote. You have to come back, and we got to go through a whole set of motion procedures. So those are things that were not necessarily in the previous one, and so we brought those in to clarify. 29 was a complete deletion. Statutorily, that was protest petitions were eliminated a year or two ago. We still had it in our rules of procedure, so we had to take that out, 29B, and we'll just take it out instead of highlighting the statute, but that's no longer there. And the only other thing that I will highlight, and it has to do with Rule 33 and the appointments. As a mayor, you do not participate in the appointments of boards and committees. However, by our charter, the mayor does participate if there's a vacancy of this board. And that's just dictated by our charter. I had Charlie check that one. I asked the question because when I was appointed, the mayor participated, but the way that was written wasn't clear. And so I clarified that, and he went back to the charter and what it says. And so that's where it clears up. That's where that gets cleared up, et cetera. And a lot of this was based upon an update by a very good attorney, Trey Allen, up in the School of Government, and he just modified these late 2017. So what I'd ask, again, nothing earth-shattering, but it does clean it up and it does modernize it. Any and all comments, questions, welcome. Jenna did a great job going through all this and comparing and contrasting. I think it's pretty solid, but obviously the week of after the 7th, we'd love to get it to Charlie and then have him look at it, and I'm sure he'll find things that really, some nuances, if you will. Comments, thoughts, questions? Okay, then moving to Code of Ethics. I'll tell you what, this one's a fun one because I've had more questions about can you do this, can you do that, can we not do this, can we do this, can we not do that. Basically, the state statute says you must be ethical, but doesn't give the towns a lot of power, municipalities a lot of power to do a lot with it. And so what Jenna focused in on as she compared and contrasted was to look at where did other towns clarify, where did the School of Government recommend that you clarify so it's real clear. Not to take anybody's rights away or anything like that, but to get at what does it mean to be ethical. So standard, but the first one up in purpose, we didn't have it in there that we have an obligation to conform to standards of ethical conduct that warrant the trust. Obviously, that's up to all of us to figure out what is mean to warrant the trust, but that wasn't in our previous, and so that was added. When you look at Section 3, number 1, basically what we get to there, it's kind of a quasi whistleblower. Everybody's free to support whatever policy, position, and opinion they have, and there should not be any reprisal from any board or citizen. There's nothing wrong with stating your opinion or stating your policy position and talking about it. And so we put that in there. This was one that has been added to a number of different, from across a number of different towns. You can't say someone behaves unethically because I disagree with them. It just is. And so putting that in, I think, provides some more clarity. Performance of duties, trust and respect. It gets to the trust and respect. Again, those are two of our values, and so that was a good catch and an add. all of our conversation should be keeping in mind that that's what we're trying to earn. And the flip side of that is, once a decision's made, we put we should try to be willing to put the board's interest ahead of their own, the town's interest. The decision's been made. Now, the tough one, and not that we have to decide upon this one today, we will have to put a whistleblower statement somewhere. We don't have one currently in our HR policy, and so Jenna originally wrote this number 7 to say, hey, we'll link to the personnel policy. The corollary to that, the whistleblower provisions detailed below in number 8 comes straight from a combination of 2 municipal entities, one of which was Winston-Salem. This is how they addressed it. On top of that, Lisa White has a whistleblower policy on the financial side, which we are required, and the auditors are going to require that. We'll get that out to you as well, but at the end of the day, the combination of Lisa, Greg, and Charlie are going to decide where's the best place, and then we'll kind of really tighten this up. Our job is, though, because we're not governed by an HR policy, we need to be able to state that we support the whistleblower policy, and we will do our part ethically to provide that environment. So that was the big thing there. In terms of enforcement, it basically reinforces the idea of work with the town attorney. Our process is very straightforward. Town manager, town attorney, and that's where it goes. If it's a criminal issue, it goes to the attorney. You don't include the manager in that. And prior to anybody on this board being here, I had one of those where I had to deal directly with the attorney. It's very clear, it's handled, and it's done, and nobody needs to know about it, because whatever happens there, it happens. And those were the major ones, other than the appendix. And rather than repeat everything that was in the written document from School of Government, extreme caution is advised before partaking in the censure procedure. It's a serious and costly process. We have as tools, if you think somebody is crossing the line, you can always reprimand somebody, and that's a more quick and way to state your intention if that's what the full board thinks when it comes to an individual. But I don't, this verbiage was not in the original write-ups, but it seems to be something that School of Government is cautioning, that people want to lead with the costly process, and it doesn't get you anywhere. It has not gotten people anywhere. So, and like the other one, comments, questions, welcome. I think Jenna's done a great job of kind of cleaning it up. Charlie's initial look at it was, hey, this does tighten these things up. At the end of the day, it's about us being responsible more than anything, but this actually shows good faith to the legislature. I will say this, I've had a couple of discussions with the legislative representatives. There is discussion about is it time to look at the ethics policy, because it was done in 2012, maybe, after all the economic stuff, and maybe time to look at it again to say, hey, if nothing else, their biggest concern is why does everybody just have to worry about it once every 4 years? Florida requires everybody to go through it every year just to kind of keep it front and center and that kind of stuff. So they're looking at things like that, and probably some other things too. Questions? All right, now on to boards and commissions. So, first item up, given we're updating this, we have to update the boards and committees' rules of procedure. So, who would love to spearhead that work effort? I mean, and bring it back to the board.
What do you mean by spearhead?
Take what we have and see what changes, if any, we need to make.
Comparing this document to the rules procedures from each of the subcommittees?
Yeah, and there's specific documents, yeah, and just bring them back. Okay. All right. Kat's got that. Commissioner Lee. Oh, no, we're in the informal part. Kat's got that. Okay. The other thing that came up, you heard it from from Ken, Main Street. Asked the question, would you like more involvement from the boards, from this board? And so the question is, I have no opinion one way or the other than as the facilitator of the meeting. Do we want to have board liaisons again? Do we want to get that assignment out there? The requirement, as I went back through how successful towns do it, it's about the board interest, not our individual. Every one of us, if we get assigned, would have to report out at the second meeting of the month during our comment part, because there's monthly meetings, what came up, what was discussed, so we're more involved. You see the list of boards and committees up there. The lone exception is the ABC board because of their fiduciary role. If they have any dealings, they go directly to you. But is that something you want to consider?
Yes. I think it's.
Okay, so that was great. We got a complete agreement on that. How do we want to, you started to say something, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
How do we want to go about assigning it, volunteering for it? How do we want to do that?
Draw from a hat. Random.
That's fine.
Or possibly, if we've ever served on that board, certain board, because like some of those had different training.
So are we going to have liaisons for planning board and board of adjustments? Because we had not before, we had stopped that before we even stopped the liaisons.
So that's a good question, and I almost took them off, and then I thought, because we got the UDO coming up, and we need to make changes to the comp plan, perhaps a liaison to help in that, with that might be a good, I don't know, what do you guys think?
I was just surprised to see it up there, and there's six of us, so maybe draw from a hat. Or
I'm game.
I would express a desire on my part to be a liaison to one or more of the boards, rather than just pull it out of the hat, because I'd like to balance it with my interests, my background in civil, not the planning board. I think there's other people here that should do that. We did that once before. I would be interested in being liaison to the Main Street Committee.
I would be interested in Parks and Rec. If you want Parks and Rec, I'll give you Parks
No.
and Rec.
No, that's fine. I've been going to Parks and Rec for the last 4 years anyway, just on my own. I would be interested in the Main Street as well.
I guess if a
What's
lot
your
of people
interest?
are picking the same one, then we'll have to go back
What's your
and
interest?
think about how we do it.
I would do planning board, and Parks and Rec.
I would do board of adjustment since I served on that, and then Main Street.
Well, I don't want to leave them alone. I'm happy to do historic preservation. And so here's my perspective on it, and I'll just throw this out there. I think Main Street is big enough in many facets to have a couple. I just believe that. 'Cause we got 5 boards, but certainly 2 wouldn't be a problem there. We have Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, Historic Preservation, Parks, Cultural and Recreation. Are you 2 comfortable with 2 on Main Street?
I think you're right. It's enough going on that it'd be worthwhile to have 2 people,
Okay.
just to balance it.
So we don't need ABC, you're doing town manager?
ABC, because of their fiduciary piece, takes their stuff through the town manager, yeah. Okay, well, that was easy enough.
Will we be doing, rules or requirements for those liaisons, what's required of them?
Yes, I will send a draft. I actually wrote one up, and then I didn't want to presume.
Okay.
So I'll send that out in terms of requirements. So just to be clear, it's Greg, Tracy, Steve, Brendan Fred, Brendan McMillan, and Kat, kind of going down, so.
Now, this doesn't exclude anyone who would just like to go as a, to any, as long as, there's a quorum issue there or not. If there's three. Say if Brenda wanted to go to Main Street.
We have three.
Okay,
Anybody that wants to go to Main Street, we need to announce.
okay.
Lowest if possible. That is, yeah. One other thing Greg and I were talking about, just to try to instill a little bit more formality, this is going to put a burden on Kelly, so she's already got a frown on her face. Greg and I were talking about, we think we need to get them over here and improve the formality, so they understand how they meet in the meeting itself. The meeting place is not exactly conducive to good procedure. And so, if you guys are okay with that, I think that's a great recommendation from Greg and staff in terms of, now, we got to figure out whether or not there's space here, but, you know, or what adjustments we have to make. But does anybody have any objection to that? Okay. Okay. I got one set of slides here, and then I keep doing this one. I keep forgetting that it's not on here. Okay, so boards and commissions. We gotta put some people in some positions. So one of the things we all have to understand is any discussion we have about applicants has to be done in public. That's been tested, vetted, argued, and every time Charlie has come back and said you must do it in public. So one of the ideas that has been tossed around is the concept of having all of us in the room at different corners. I won't call it, it's speed applicant conversations, whatever you want to call it, but basically figure out a night when we can get everybody here, all the applicants, and we interview them all, and then come back together and actually have all six of us talk about what we think of these folks. It's got to be done in public. There's no getting around that. And the question is, versus having us sit here and somebody come up and we pepper somebody with questions, which is a little bit more intimidating. That recommendation came back from the outside to say, hey, this might be a little bit better way to get to know your candidates. It also might get us some more applicants as well, because, but what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Speed interviewing, yes.
So
Thank you.
one-on-one, and we each switch person?
Yeah, so if we got 18 people, and we cycle them through 6 people, and just give them 5
Can you
minutes.
set us up little tables around
Yeah,
the room?
all the way around. Little interview cards.
Okay. Are we all gonna ask the same questions? Like, are we gonna ask each candidate the same questions?
What I think is probably, I was going to say something, I caught
So
myself.
I'm comparing apples to apples.
Yeah,
If
so
I ask
I-
one candidate A, B, C, and D, all
So-
the same questions.
yeah,
my
so-
questions.
What I think works very well, what I've seen work very well, is we have 2 or 3 consistent questions, and then one that you want to ask that helps you make an ascertain something. So all that to say is, since Kat's working on rules and procedures, who wants to take the lead to work with Kelly to say, okay, we're going to schedule this, but how about, putting together an interview card and that kind of stuff, because we
I'll
got to
work
get this done in August.
I'll work with Kelly. Kelly?
Anybody want to help? I don't have any experience with the card side of it, so I couldn't do anything. But we need to meet, we need to do this in August or get this going because we have to appoint that first meeting in September, which I think is the 11th. Yeah. So we can properly announce, get them on board, get them trained, et cetera. So we got to get this done in a 6-month process. So. So there's a work item that's going on that we'll probably schedule for at the next work session, what the output of those things are, and then get that scheduled. 'Cause I don't think we're going to get anybody scheduled in the next 2 weeks. That'd be a little tough. But yes, in essence, that's getting built and brought back to us to make sure we're comfortable. So we got the 2 Brendas and Kelly that want to work on that. Okay. Here's what we're up against. Total of 20 appointments need to be made. We only have 16 are annual term, et cetera. We have 18 applied for 6 boards and commissions. Just about, I think, looking down, I think there was either 9 applied for the Main Street, so we're going to have to sort through that. We're going to have to, and as you work on the questions, how do we get at what else you're good at, kind of thing, because that's going to be critical, so we know. But that's what we're up against. So the other part of this is, I think by having this in place, I've talked to a couple people. They didn't apply because they didn't know what the process was, and so I think we should be open to, if there's other people that want to come, let's get their applications in and encourage them to file with Kelly. So that's what we're up against. That's what we're facing. We have an action plan. Any questions?
Well, I'm looking at the list, and so.
Let me pause. Would everybody like a booklet of all the applicants? So that's a to-do that I wanted to make sure we got to Kelly to give her time to do.
I already have one.
You have one? You like one? Like one? Okay. 4.
Well, my question is, so like some of the boards, there's only one person that's applied. So do we even need to go through the process of interviewing these people if we have no other applicant?
I think, given some of the things that have happened in the past, I think we should interview everybody and make sure that
we may not want that person.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I come from the environment where they didn't interview anybody, and all of a sudden you got put on a board you didn't know anything about at times. So.
Do we do any background checking on this? Are we legally permitted to ask questions like have you ever been charged with a felony?
Well, you raise a good question. So I don't believe we're able to ask that, but we would want to have Charlie review the questions to make sure that we don't, in our speed interviewing, go too far. Yeah. You cannot ask them any of that type of. We're not a personnel. We're an organization. We are a volunteer organization. So that's the line.
Can we ask about things that have to be publicly registered, such as are you on any offender watch lists? One would hate to have someone say on the Parks and Rec committee and then find out they're a registered sex offender.
So
Kelly has some.
come on up.
Yeah, come on.
So this is something that we've been talking with Dean about, specifically to start at least with the Parks and Rec, because.
There's so much interaction with children
Right,
and
and
families.
she's really trying to get that committee to be involved in, fun days in the park and all these other things. So I think it's something that we definitely need to do. I know it's been discussed in like Clerk World recently too on our listserv. Clerks have been asking what other cities and towns
You're set up, but can we do it legally?
We can ask Shirley about legally, but I believe so. From what I've read through what other cities and towns have done, as long as they consent to it, you have to, get the necessary forms. And it's just like when you apply for a job and you consent to a background check, you have to consent to it and fill out the forms with the background check on it. So.
What type of background check would you be doing? Is that just within the state, or is it across the states? And is it just through the computer, or is it through fingerprints? Because there's a difference.
I don't believe set up for fingerprints. It would be similar to that which employees take.
So you're just doing something online to see if anything shows up.
Right. So in particular, the National Sex Offender Registry, for the Parks and Rec specifically, but, that would definitely be one.
So before we go too far, can we get a legal position and,
That to Charlie.
because,
Just so it's on your radar that's all something
Yeah.
that staff's concerned about.
yeah, well, and thank you for being concerned, because that, that issue has come up, and it's an important one. The same thing, not to go down a rat hole, but the same thing applies to our events. If we have volunteers, do we have to do anything there? And so, expand it. So you sitting there for Autumn Treasures, we have a lot of volunteers, a lot of kid volunteers. Not that I'm proposing we do the background check, and that's a budget item too. I mean, we have to think about that. Obviously, there's no price. We have to do everything for safety's sake, but there's ways to work these things that, if they want to have a particular individual volunteer, as long as that person is always with two other people, you can work these things. I just don't know all those rules, but certainly other organizations probably could help us on that. But
It's the same kind of thing we used in the Sunday school that I ran, was Old Safe Church, and you have always had to have a second or a third individual with any adult, so they were never alone with the child.
yeah, so okay. Other questions? We interview them. The other part of it, Tracy, to your question, are they open to, like, I think Bob Morgan is in there, he's the planning board chair, but he was open to the ABC board. Bob, you willing to go over there? Was he really willing? We got to be able to get at those, and that's why I was asking the question about the books, because some of that stuff will be easier to understand when you look at it. Okay, that's it. We got done with 12 minutes to spare. So, next up, just so everybody knows, on August 14th, core infrastructure and intelligent growth. That'll run the full 2 hours. We'll get, and again, the whole idea behind an informal work session is so whoever is presenting comes and can just talk and we ask questions. It's not to get something out ahead of time so it can be critiqued. It's really intended to get at the questions you want to ask and have a good discussion. And if the discussion doesn't include something that you want, raise the question, like your question to Greg about what's changed. You'll go back and get that. And those are great questions to get out in the open. So do more of that. So with that, the schedule, let me see. Oops. Correct. So what we did is right there. So based upon schedules, so 14th and then the 28th will cover quality of life and the financial side. So everything was moved. Everything's been vetted with staff or with Greg to say, hey, is this reasonable to expect staff can prepare for that? So, is all right? Call it a day.